Well, it's Sunday.
Yes, we got our coffee today.
It's Sunday, and it is the 20th of September, 2020. I'm sure there's some significance to that. The 20th of September, 2020. We're going now. And so, what's that?
What happened?
It's the 20th of September, 2020. There's a lot of 20s in there, is all I'm saying. So let me be the first. Let me be the first to welcome you to Lashana Tova Takakabu. Now, for Final Jeopardy, what does that mean? Anybody got a clue?
No.
Every Rosh Hashanah, you'll hear me use that phrase. That phrase means, may your name be written in the book, which is the standard greeting in Hebrew for Rosh Hashanah, because Rosh Hashanah is considered the head of the year. So this is Happy New Year's in Hebrew. And it's on Rosh Hashanah during the start of the Musaf or additional prayer service in the morning that the last trumpet of Judaism is blown. There are 11 sets of 9 trumpet blasts, and then there is a following trumpet blast which makes the 100th, which is called Yom Teruah, which means the awakening blast. That blast is called the last trump, and it's at the awakening blast that the dead are said to be raised. And so the gates of heaven are open. That's one of the elements of Rosh Hashanah. And the righteous, the Tzaddikim, go in. That phrase right there, may your name be written in the book, means that on Rosh Hashanah, all men are judged and placed into one of 3 books. The book of life, the book of the Ruachim, or the holy wicked, totally wicked, or the book of the Tzaddikim, holy or totally righteous. If you are written in the book of the holy or totally righteous, your fate is secure. Heaven is your final destiny. If you are written in the book of the Ruachim, or the holy wicked, there is no hope for you. But there is another book called the Book of the Binonim, which is neither righteous nor wicked. The Book of the Intermediate, it's called. And if you're written into that book, it's a transitory book. And you have until the Nilai, or closing of the gates ceremony on Yom Kippur, to get your life straight with the Lord. Because if you do not, then on that occasion, you are written into the book of the Ruachim and you are totally lost. But you have that period of time between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur to get your life straight with the Lord. That period of time has a name. It's called the Yamin Noraim, the days of awe. These days of awe are consistent with what we know of as the tribulation period. So if you are not right with God on Rosh Hashanah, so that you go in through the gates of heaven, which are opened to the righteous, then you have to stay on planet Earth and endure the tribulation. So that was for no extra charge. Oh, you think we should put this up there?
Yeah, I thought you was advertising Ford's up there.
I thought it was advertising eating places.
Oh.
Okay, now we got it up there. Now, if you'll notice, last week, I am so absent-minded, I forgot to put my microphone up here. Hey there!
You start without us?
Well, this is Rosh Hashanah and you were late.
Oh, I thought it was yesterday.
Well, it's today too.
Okay. I don't want to turn off my coffee.
So,
I want a hug.
You're not fishing today. You like to us, Gary. You're not fishing.
How you guys?
Hi.
How are you?
Oh, yesterday.
Hi,
You
Gary.
finished today?
Good to see you.
Hey, good seeing you.
Okay,
Well, last week I had forgot. It's been so long since I've done this. I forgot to plug in my microphone last week.
Oh, wow.
And as it turns out, the condenser mic on this picked it up just fine.
Well, that's good.
So I brought my microphone today, and guess what? Somebody ripped off my microphone stand. I don't have anything to put it on. I wasn't going to hold that thing for an hour. I thought.
Is it yours? Lay it next to you.
So no, it belongs to the church, but I don't know where it is. It's not down in the music section. So I said they would find me one next week.
I furnished one.
So
They picked it up.
so today,
I'll tell them back to you.
I think I've lost control of the class already.
Sorry.
Usually it takes 15, 20 minutes, you know. And
I thought we were awfully early. Now we're not even hardly here.
I told him, I said, if we get here right after that's over, then.
yeah, we've been going early because, I mean, nobody just wants to sit here and twiddle their
Sure,
thumbs.
we want to sit here and visit.
No, we don't.
You know,
Okay, well,
church used to be at 9:30, now it's 9 o'clock, but you close it off half hour.
yeah.
Messes us up.
Okay, so this is Bible Prophecy Lesson number 285, all prophecies of the Bible that make any sense. And this is Daniel chapter, and I left it blank. Actually, it's chapter 5.
Okay.
This is terrible, you know. A mind is a terrible thing to waste.
Yes, it is.
In my case, there's not much to waste. So we will review lesson number 284. We got some signs of the times for you and the scripture of the day, and then we'll do Daniel chapter. I can't believe I left it out of both places. Daniel chapter 5. Well, I'll put that in before I post it, as if anybody cares. So before we get started, let's open class with a word of prayer. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, our Creator and Maker, and the one in whom we live and move and have our being, and we're grateful that you've given us life down to this time, this Rosh Hashanah, where the world was created. And we look forward, Lord, to some near Rosh Hashanah to hear that last trumpet blow and to see you face to face. And so, as we endure all these slings and arrows that are coming our way, particularly for Christians in this age, that we seem to be under attack from all forces, all sides and all forces, and certainly Satan is active right now, and so we just pray that you would put a tent of protection around each one of our class. Protect us from both physical harm and emotional harm and from all of these plagues and diseases that are coming upon this world. And we just pray that you would be with us as we consider these words from Daniel, and that we might all leave here a little better armed to deal with the problems of the next week than we were when we came in. So bless us now. In your name we pray. Amen.
Hey Carl, I gotta say one thing.
What's that?
Things are gonna get better, cause I hired Charles Bronson to take care of the situation.
Who?
Charles Bronson.
The Death Wish guy.
I'm thinking, and I think I told you before, the book of life, where our names are written in the book of life, and I mentioned to you, that could very well be our 66 books that we know. Because if God put those Bible codes together in the first 5 books, that's where the names are written.
I will be willing to bet you that each one of your names are written in an equidistant letter code in the Old Testament.
Well, I need to.
Somebody took a challenge, and they took the 10 or 15 most prominent Jewish names of the last 500 years, you know, and they did a search, because there are programs that will do an equidistant letter search in the Old Testament for names. Not only did they find the names of all of those Jewish rabbis and sages, but they found their birthdays and their death days in the same code. So I am absolutely convinced that all of our names are in the Old Testament. Everyone who is found written in the book of life. That Bible may be our book of life. It may very well be the book.
I couldn't find my name there.
And it is.
Well, you just don't know Hebrew. You know. Okay, moving right along, because if we don't move right along, we may be here a long
Well,
time.
I told everybody in an email somewhere around 10:30 to 10:45 to give them time to get here, so
Okay,
you
well,
don't wanna move along too fast because it's.
well, I am sure you will slow me down if I
Well,
can move too fast.
and just to let you know, Rosh Hashanah is now officially over. It's after 6 o'clock. The new day started in Jerusalem, and we're stuck here another year. Or unless you're wrong, and we're gonna be out of here anytime.
I hope I'm wrong and we're out of here this afternoon or
It's
something.
6 o'clock, Israel, it's 6 o'clock, and that's where their new day starts at 6
It's
o'clock.
a new day.
Yeah.
Would that be all the Jewish people?
Um,
You talking about all the Jewish people now?
In Jerusalem, their new day starts at 6
Yeah.
What
o'clock.
about the Jewish people here?
Oh, no, they're on our time. They're
Okay,
stuck.
okay.
Is
Don't have it.
that
Yeah.
means 6 o'clock at night or?
6 o'clock at night is the beginning of the day for Jerusalem,
Huh.
or for Jews. How's that work, Pat?
Okay,
Then sunset to sunup is their 24-hour day, or 12-hour day, 12 hour.
is it my turn yet?
No, but go ahead.
Usually it takes me 15 or 20 minutes to lose control of the class. I'm getting better. I'm getting it done faster nowadays.
Well, we haven't been together for 6 months. Give us a break.
Oh, yes. Well, moving right along, chapter number 2, which was last week's lesson. That was Daniel and his interpretation of the dream from Nebuchadnezzar, where Nebuchadnezzar saw the nondescript beast with the head of gold, shoulders of silver, belly of brass, legs of iron, and the feet of iron mixed with clay. We learned then that Daniel was taken into captivity around 605 BC. He was approximately 15 years old when he was taken into captivity. He and his associates were the most talented of all the wise men that were taken into captivity of the Jewish people. And so it was the custom of the Babylonians, of Nebuchadnezzar, to make those children who had exceptional wisdom and talent, they made wise men or magi out of them. Magi is where we get our word for magician. And Daniel had the ability to interpret dreams and things, and the people in the realm, being political, they were jealous of Daniel because Daniel, I mean, he was smart, and you know how that works. If you're too smart for your own good, well, people get jealous. They'll try to put you down. So they tried to kill Daniel, and they did it in a very interesting way. They had the king sign an order that said, there will be no praying to any god anytime during the day. Can't do it. And so Daniel, who always prayed during the day, I think it was at lunch or sometime, what did he do? He prayed anyway. Which reminds me of a current situation. The powers that be that said that we can't associate together and worship God on Sunday because of the plague. Wonder what Daniel would have done.
He would have had a peaceful protest.
He would have had a peaceful protest, yes. Well, so at any rate, Daniel, the edict went out that all the wise men are going to be killed because none of them could interpret the dream that Nebuchadnezzar had. Yes?
I don't think Daniel's so smart. The God he served was smart and related to Daniel.
Well, you know, God was the one who set this whole thing up anyway.
Oh, yeah.
So at any rate, the wise men wanted this edict passed, which Nebuchadnezzar foolishly passed, and Nebuchadnezzar liked Daniel, and it disturbed him greatly when he discovered that Daniel was found in violation of the law. And the way the law works, if you're in Babylon, it doesn't matter what the king says. After he has established the law is the law, and that's it. So Daniel was going to get thrown in the lion's den. And so, wait a minute, I'm in the wrong. Back up. Okay. Daniel heard that the king had to submit the edict to kill all the wise men. And so he came before Nebuchadnezzar and said, hey, give me a day and I'll give you an interpretation of your dream. It's not so much that I know what's going on, but there is a God in heaven that does.
Right.
And so Daniel came, and of course he not only gave the king the dream, because the king couldn't even remember the dream, but he gave him the interpretation also. And the interpretation was, well, O Nebuchadnezzar, O King of Kings, what you saw was an image. The image had a head of gold, shoulders of silver, belly of brass, legs of iron, and feet with iron mixed with clay. Now, here is the interpretation. You, O King of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, are the head of gold. You are King of Kings. And then he says, and you will be followed by a less valuable or more base metal nation of Medo-Persia, followed by a belly of brass, which turned out to be the Grecian kingdom, followed by legs of iron, which was typical of the Roman kingdom, and legs of iron matriculated into feet of iron mixed with clay. And the interesting thing about the feet of iron mixed with clay was that it says that the feet of clay mixed with iron were reported as an attempt to mingle with the seed of men. To which I pointed out that, Satan has a progeny. We don't really understand quite what it is, but we do remember that Jesus at one time in the synagogue accused the Sadducees of being the sons of Satan, sons of serpents, and called their father Satan. Now, was that just metaphorical, or did he mean it? Well, and then I pointed out that, there are different kinds of human beings that we have discovered on planet Earth. There are at least two kinds. There is Homo sapiens, and there's another group called Homo capensis. These are coneheads. And these coneheads are found, their skulls are found all over Peru, the Paracas region of Peru. And their heads are not human. They have no parietal space in their skull like human beings. They have two holes in the base of their skull, not like human beings. The volume of their skulls are 60% larger than ours, and they are cone-shaped. I mean, they're big, long-headed things. And so this indicates that, at least in the recent past, there were people or personages or Homo capensis that were on planet Earth, and maybe still are. And then I pointed out that there's this lady named Karen Hudes, who was an attorney for the World Bank, and she claims they are real, and that they have been in meetings with them. And she said they had long, very cone-shaped heads and with brilliant blue eyes, and they seem to be controlling everything. And so maybe, and this is all speculation because we're watching the ping pong game from under the table, but maybe this is a progeny of Satan. I don't know. We'll find out. Yeah.
And wouldn't that be interesting, because they say when the rapture occurs that aliens will have taken us to the nation.
Yeah, and here you're going to have a perfect, introduction to the aliens. Well, we were here all along. We have been controlling you and your scientists who have determined that, we probably were seeded from some other civilization. Well, sure you were. Here we are. We are your gods.
Yeah.
Everybody's going to jump right on the bandwagon. We are promised a great deception. For me and my money, that would be the best deception Satan could pull off, and I think he's going to do it. Okay, any questions about the dream and the legs and the iron and all that sort of stuff?
I thought it was interesting how it went from a king that had full control to a king that had less control, and then another king that had less control.
Yeah, it just kept going and going, and each one became less valuable or less powerful than the other. Interesting how God does those things. Yeah.
How old would these coneheads be?
According to Karen Hudes, they lived to be about 300 years old. So, sounds interesting. We have no way of verifying any of this, but
They look like a human body?
they look just like humans, except they're not. And in fact, they did a DNA analysis because they have these coneheads they found in Peru, and they did a DNA analysis on them, and they said the original work on the analysis indicated a species that has been unknown to human history, and that they are so much different from humans that the potential of them breeding with a human being is extremely remote, and if they did, their offspring would be inert, like breeding a donkey with a horse. You get a mule, but the mule dies. You know, he can't. He has no progeny. So they were extremely different, and it just seems to fit with what they're saying here in Daniel, that you know that they will mingle with the seed of men, but it will not adhere. What were they talking about? Well, it sounds like we're talking about genetic manipulation here. And so, just like I said, this is not a subject that you will get from most pulpits. Okay, moving right along here, a report from Iran. Christianity is proliferating and Islam is diminishing. Isn't it interesting that everywhere in planet Earth where Christianity comes under severe attack and persecution, that it thrives? Isn't that interesting? Well, the number of Christians in Islamic Republic of Iran has reportedly grown to nearly 1 million, despite that country's being the world's top sponsor of terror and a leading recruiter and financer of jihad. Not only is it illegal to convert to Christianity in Iran or to preach it, the World Watch list also ranks that Middle Eastern country at number 9 on its list of 50 most dangerous nations to be a Christian. Regardless, it appears that nothing can stop the spread of the gospel of Jesus. Isn't that interesting?
Well, and my cousin just sent me something, and it was some Black Lives Matter anarchist that they were reaching out to burn every religious statue and every church. They want to burn them down.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's their goal.
Isn't that interesting?
And then over there, that's in the United States, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So over there, they're...
Well, the times, they are changing, aren't they? You know, 50 years ago, who would have thought we would be sitting here in this condition? I certainly wouldn't have. Now we got peace breaking out. Watch out. Bahrain and United Arab Emirates peace deal show Washington's Arab-Israel experts got it wrong again. Isn't this just like Trump? He goes in, he throws away the old, what do you call them, general models of understanding. You know, you can't have peace in the Middle East until you have peace first with the Palestinians. That's the way it has to work. It has to work that way. Well, and then what did Trump do? He went in and went around them, started making peace with all the other people, which putting so much pressure on the Palestinians, it's going to force them into peace. Oh, this is a masterful stroke. Rejecting the presence of a Jewish state in the Middle East has been a what is that word? I've never seen that word before. Okay, whatever that word is. Political and moral commitment in the Arab world for 75 years. Travel to or from Israel was prohibited, as was all trade, culture exchange, sporting competition, whatever. For years, even the mention of the name Israel was abjured in favor of an alternative formulation like Zionist entity. The 2 Arab states that did, after a series of military defeats, sign a peace treaty with Israel, maintained formal relations while steering clear of anything else that looked like the dreaded normalization. The experts told us that no Arab-Israeli peace was possible without settling the Palestinian issue first. Years and years of Palestinian rejection of peace deals did not wear down the certainty that Israel was at fault, but they did wear down the patience of some Arab states who didn't want their entire foreign policies hostage to a revenge fantasy. It's not that Washington's foreign policy Brahmins were against any peace deal between Israel and the Arab state. For years they preached that the most stabilizing things that could happen in the region was for an Israeli withdrawal from the Golan Heights, leading to a peace deal with Syria. What a stupid position to be. You withdraw from the Golan Heights and you open up Israel to attack from Syria. I mean, and You think Israel's going to do that? Well, hey, these people aren't stupid. They know, you got to have a barrier there. And if you let the Syrians back in the Golan Heights, guess what they do? Just what they did before. They put artillery up there and start shelling Israel. Yeah. But the thing about it that's so interesting is that Donald Trump is taking every one of these paradigms and twisting it around on its head. And he is doing things that have never been done or even thought of before. It's almost like God was directing his motions and efforts.
Look at Pence also, the vice president.
Yeah.
He's moving too.
Well, he is the probably more controlling factor in that whole administration as far as belief in God and the sorts go. But here's the thing that I would say that we would want to watch out for now, and that is, but concerning the times and seasons, brethren, you have no need that I should write to you, for you yourselves perfectly know the day of the Lord comes as a thief in the night, for when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction comes upon them as the labor pains upon a pregnant woman, and they shall not escape. But ye, brethren, are not in darkness, so that this day should overtake you as a thief. We know it's coming. The rest of the world is looking for peace and safety. They're crying out for it in all avenues, and particularly Israel. They have been under assault forever, ever since they became a nation again back in 1948. And so my suspicion is this was probably directed more at Israel than to anyone, because Israel right now is a secular nation. They have some Hasidics in there, some fundamentalist Hebrew believers, but the majority of them are just like New Yorkers. They're just secular folk. And so they're hoping to, because of their intelligence and they're just so much smarter than the rest of the world, they lean on that rather than on God. And every time you lean on something other than God, you're leaning on a straw. So my suspicion is this passage was probably written to Israel as much as anybody. So you got to watch out. It's not war breaking out that's the determining factor. It's peace breaking out. When you see peace breaking out, look up. Okay, Daniel chapter 5. At least I got the 5 on this one. The writing on the wall. Belshazzar, the king, made a great feast for 1,000 of his lords and drank wine in the presence of the 1,000. While he tasted the wine, Belshazzar gave the command to bring the gold and silver vessels, which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the temple, which had been in Jerusalem, that the king and his lords and his wives and his concubines might drink from them. Then they brought the gold vessels, which they had taken from the temple of the house of God, which had been in Jerusalem, and the kings and the lords and the wives and his concubines drank from them. This is anathema, right? And they drank wine, praised the gods of gold and silver, bronze and iron and wood and stone. And in that same hour, fingers of a man's hand appeared and wrote opposite the lampstand on the plaster wall of the king's palace, and the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. Now this has got to scare the pajabbers out of you, right? You got a partial hand up there and it's writing on the wall. Then the king's countenance changed. His thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his hips were loosened and his knees knocked together. Yeah, this is one scared dude. The king cried out aloud to bring the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers. And the king spoke, saying to the Chaldeans, or to the wise men of Babylon, whoever reads the writing and tells me its interpretation will be clothed with purple and have a chain of gold around his neck, and he shall be the third ruler of the kingdom. Now all of the king's wise men came, but they could not read the writing, nor make known to the king the interpretation. Then King Belshazzar was greatly troubled, and his countenance was changed, and the lords were astonished. The queen, because of the words of the king and the lords, came to the banquet hall. The queen spoke, saying, O king, live forever. Do not let your thoughts trouble you, nor let your countenance change, for there is a man in your kingdom who is the spirit, in whom is the spirit of the holy God, and in the days of your father, light and understanding and wisdom, like the wisdom of the gods, were found in him. And the king Nebuchadnezzar, your father the king, made him chief of the magicians, astrologers, Chaldeans, and soothsayers, inasmuch as an excellent spirit and knowledge and understanding, interpreting dreams, solving riddles, and explaining enigmas were found in Daniel, whom the king named Belteshazzar. Now let Daniel be called, and he will give the interpretation. Yeah. Then Daniel was brought before the king, and the king spoke and said to Daniel, Are you that Daniel, who is one of the captives from Judah, whom my father brought from Judah? I have heard of you, that the Spirit of God is in you, and that the light and understanding and excellent wisdom are found in you. Now the wise men, the astrologers, have been brought in before me, and that they should read the writing and make known to me its interpretation, but they could not give the interpretation of the thing to me. And I have heard of you, that you give interpretations and explain enigmas. Now if you can read the writing and make known to me its interpretation, you shall be clothed in purple, and have a chain of gold around your neck, and shall be third ruler in the kingdom. How about that? Then Daniel said to him, Keep your lousy stuff. Give it to somebody else. Yet I will read the writing to the king, and make known to him the interpretation. And, O king, the Most High God gave Nebuchadnezzar, your father, a kingdom and majesty and glory and honor. And because of the majesty that he gave him, all peoples, nations, languages trembled and feared before him. Whomever he wished, he executed. Whomever he wished, he kept alive. Whomever he wished, he set up. And whomever he wished, he put down. But when his heart was lifted up and his spirit was hardened with pride, he was disposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. Then he was driven from the sons of men, and his heart was made like the beast, and his dwelling was in the with the wild donkeys, and they fed him grass like oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till he knew that the Most High rules the kingdom of men and appoints over it whom he chooses. So in other words, Nebuchadnezzar got a bit arrogant, and God, well, you talk about humility. How would you like to go out and graze with the cattle and not know yourself from a donkey?
I've done that for a year.
But you, his son Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart. Although you knew this, and you have lifted yourself up against the Lord of heaven, and brought the vessels of his house before you, you and your lords, your wives, your concubines, and have drunk wine from them, and you have praised the gods of silver and gold and bronze and iron and wood and stone, which do not see, nor hear, nor know. And the God who holds your breath in his hand and owns all your ways was not glorified. Then the fingers on the hand were sent from him, and this writing was written. And this is the inscription that was written. Mene, mene, tekel, Perez. Some versions say mene, mene, tekel, Upharsin. Upharsin is a different word. One is Hebrew, one is Aramaic. This is the interpretation of each word. Mene, God has numbered your kingdom and finished it. Tekel, you have been weighed in the balance and found wanting. Perez, your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. Bad news. Then Belshazzar gave the command, and they clothed Daniel with purple, and a chain of gold around his neck, and made a proclamation concerning him that he should be the third ruler of the kingdom. Now, that very night, Belshazzar, king of the Chaldeans, was slain. Darius the Mede received the kingdom, being about 62 years old. So Daniel was right. You can keep your lousy stuff because you don't own anything now. You dead. So the interesting thing about this, in my estimation, is, well, let's look at these words. In the Jewish encyclopedia, the name Belshazzar was previously held to have been invented by the author of the book of Daniel, which has long been recognized as a Maccabean production. See, the Jews, they discount Daniel, and they have to, and as we study it, I'll show you why they have to discount Daniel. Since the discovery and decipherment of the cuneiform inscriptions, however, Belshazzar now is generally admitted to be a Hebrew Aramaic equivalent of the Babylonian form Belshazzar, or however you pronounce that, Bel meaning preserve the king, which has been found in cuneiform documents as the name of the eldest son of Nabonidus, whatever. the last native king of Babylon. So, Belteshazzar, it says here, his span of ruling was from 555 to 538. The interesting thing is that the Jews hold that his reign ended in 538. Most every other source that you read says that his reign ended in 539. Now, why does 538 make any interest to us? Well, many Tekel Perez. Many is 1,000 gerahs. A tekel is 20 gerahs. Perez is 500 gerahs. It's a monetary term. And if you add up many tekel Perez, it comes out to 2,520.
Oh.
Now, if you were to take 2,520 and say add years to that, now remember when Nebuchadnezzar was sent out into the field, it said, you're going to be out there until 7 times passes over you. Well, how much is a time? Well, you'll find out in the Bible, 7 times, a time is either a year, a day, it's one of those two. So what if a time 7 times, it's 360 days or 360 years. So 7 times 360 years, how many is that? 2520. That number keeps coming up. There are those who say that there's a dual meaning. When Nebuchadnezzar was sent out in the pasture, he was there for 7 years, 7 360-day years, but it also implies that there were 7 times 360-year periods in which beastly kingdoms would rule over the planet Earth. So if you use this date of the last king of Babylon as a marking point and go 7 times out, you go 2,520 years out. And guess where you end up? 1981 AD. Now, I've taught this before, and I scratched my head and I said, whatever happened in 1981? I said, well, something must have happened. Anything interesting? Ali Khamenei. Ali Khamenei nearly escaped assassination attempt by the Mujahideen Khalq when a bomb concealed in his tape recorder exploded beside him. On June 27, 1981, while Khamenei had returned from the front line, he went to the Abu Zar mosque according to his Saturday schedule, and after the first prayer, he began to give a lecture to worshippers who had written their questions on a piece of paper. Meanwhile, a tape recorder accompanied with the papers was placed on the desk in front of Khamenei by a young man who pressed the button. And after a minute, the loudspeaker sound became like a whistle, and suddenly the tape recorder exploded. The gift from the Furqan group of the Islamic Republic was written on the inner wall of the tape recorder. Ayatollah Khamenei's treatment took several months, and his arm and vocal cords and lungs were seriously injured, and he was permanently injured, losing the use of his right arm. So what has this got to do with anything? Well, if you go on to, and I did this, you notice that his right arm is up there in a sling and all. Now, if you go, I wasn't even trying, I wasn't even looking for this. But one day, throughout 3 or 4 years ago, when I was watching the Canadian Open, it came to my mind that I need to go and look in the internet and see if there's any peace treaties that were breaking out in the Middle East. And I was looking for peace treaties in the Middle East. And I went to the YouTube, and this thing came up. I don't know why it came up, but it came up. And I said, well, now that's strange. Why should I be interested in this thing? And then I began to read about it. Ali Khamenei's assassination attempt was successful. He was killed because he says, as he recovered in the operating room, he said, I found myself on the border between 2 worlds, between heaven and earth. Actually, it was between the earth and hell, I think. And on the way there, it said he had no pulse, no blood pressure, and no respiration. The guy was clinically dead. So what has that got to do with anything? Well, of course, you know, in Revelation chapter 13 it says, "Therefore I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rising out of the sea, having 7 heads, 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and on his heads blasphemous name. Now the beast which I saw was like a leopard, its feet were like a bear, its mouth was like the mouth of a lion, and the dragon gave him his power, his throne, and great authority. And I saw one of his heads as if it had been mortally wounded, and his deadly wound was healed, and the world marveled after the beast," another beast onto the scene. Now, this was one of the first places in the Revelation we hear about the Antichrist. We know from him that he is one of the heads of this final conglomeration of 10 toes. His head doesn't mean his head, it means he was the head of the nation. He was wounded to death, it says, but he didn't die. This is one of the criteria for the Antichrist. The next one we find in Zechariah chapter 11. "And the Lord said to me, Now take yourself the implements of a foolish shepherd, for I will raise up a shepherd in the land who will not care for those who are cut off, nor seek the young, nor heal those who are broken, nor feed those who stand still, but he will eat the flesh and fat, and tear off the hooves in pieces. Woe to the worthless shepherd." Check that worthless, it's false god shepherd. This guy is a false god shepherd who leaves the flock. A sword will be on his arm, and against his right eye his arm shall be completely withered, and his right eye shall be totally blinded, dimmed by virtue of age. What do we know here? For those who know about the Antichrist, this passage is defining the Antichrist. It sets him out unique from all other leaders of the realm. He has to be a false god shepherd. What is that? He has to be a cleric for a false religious system. He has to have his arm withered. Yep. His eyes, or right eye it says, shall be blinded. But the words in the Hebrew are dimmed by virtue of age. That means the guy has to be old. Okay?
I'm old.
Revelation chapter 13. "And so that no one buys or sells except he has the mark of the beast or the number of his name. Here's wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. Okay? By the way, 666 is a holy number in Islam. If you look at the Codex Vaticanus, you will find this characterization of the word 666. It's chi, psi, stigma. If you read it from left to right, chi, psi, stigma, because of the way the Greek is designed, each one of these characters stand for a numerical value, and that's where 666 comes from. If you look at the bottom characterization, it appears to be almost identical, only the centerpiece is flipped on its side. It, in Aramaic or Arabic, read from right to left, reads, "In the name of Allah." So what does that mean? Well, you can rewrite that without any insult to the Greek, and it will read like this. "Here's wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the multitude of the beast, for his multitude is of a man, and his multitude is in the name of Allah." You get the message? The Antichrist comes in the name of Allah. So, it says his feet were like the bear. What does that tell you? You got to go to Daniel, and you'll find out eventually that the bear was Medo-Persia. His feet being like a bear tells you where he stands. He stands in Medo-Persia. So whoever the Antichrist is, he's got to be in the ancient region of Medo-Persia. Where's that? Right there. See that yellow-colored area? Yeah. Does that get Iran? Right on the nose. That's why they call it Medo-Persia. Persia is Iran. Here's some more scriptures. Of course, his head mortally wounded. We got that. He was wounded, but he lived. He has to be, in Daniel 7:24, which we will get to eventually, he shall be different from all of the others before him. There has to be some distinguishing characteristic about this leader different from all the other leaders of that area. And he will be a vile person, according to 11:21, Daniel 11:21, and he will come in peaceably and seize the kingdom by intrigue.
By what?
Intrigue.
Oh.
In other words, he's going to be sneaky.
Uh-oh.
Now, here is the Seleucid portion of Alexander the Great's kingdom. We know the guy has to come from the Seleucid portion of Alexander the Great's kingdom because of Daniel 11, verse 21. It's talking about a series of events of battles between the king of the north and the king of the south. And then it says, speaking of the king of the north, in his estate shall come a contemptible creature. Where is that estate? The estate is the estate of the Seleucids. Does that gather and get Iran? Gets it right on the nose. So he qualifies in all of these events so far. Daniel 11:23 says, he will become strong with a small number of people. So whoever he is, he has to have a little group of, a small group of people that have tremendous power. And he will enter peaceably into the richest provinces and disperse plunder among all of his buddies. And it says he will confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. Well, has he confirmed one yet? No, he hasn't. Zechariah 11, we've already gone over that one. Here are the 12 requirements of the Antichrist. He's got to reside in the region of Medo-Persia. He's got to be wounded to death and yet live. He's got to come in the name of Allah. His number is 666. He comes out of the Seleucid portion of Alexander the Great's kingdom. His kingdom will be different from previous rulers. He will be strong with a small group. While at peace, he will seize property and redistribute it to his group. And he will confirm a treaty with the many, which initiates the day of the Lord. He will be a false god shepherd or a false god cleric. His arm will be withered by some weapon. The Bible says sword, but sword just means a weapon of war or an implement of war.
He must have a beard.
And and his right eye dimmed by virtue of age, which means he's old.
Uh-oh.
So if you get all of these 12 criteria, then you are a candidate for the Antichrist. Well, is Ali Khamenei a candidate? Let's go see. He comes out of Iran, which is the regional part of Medo-Persia and the Seleucid Empire. Points 1 and 2, or 5, he qualifies. Now, he narrowly escaped death, and he got blowed up, but he lived, and he lost the use of his right arm. His arm is withered as one of the requirements. He comes in the name of Allah. My gosh, he's an Islamic cleric. His number is 666 because that is a holy number in Islam.
Wow.
And his kingdom must be different from previous rulers. Well, it's different because Khomeini was the first cleric to ever control Iran. And it's different from all the previous leaders because he's consolidated political power, economic power, and religious power all to himself. That has never been done before. Khomeini controls the Republican Guard, the IRGC, which is a small group with unlimited power in Iran. And they have gone through and systematically ripped off the country and enriched themselves. So that qualifies. Small, and while at peace, he will seize property and redistribute it. And Reuters investigation, Reuters or whoever that is, said he built his empire on a systematic seizure of thousands of properties belonging to ordinary Iranians, seizing property from religious minorities, business people, Iranians living abroad, at times falsely claiming the properties were abandoned. However, under Ayatollah Khomeini, the organization has been acquiring property for itself and has grown into a major center of economic power in Iran. He's a false god shepherd. His arm was withered. His right eye was dimmed by virtue of age. The guy is old, and he's about nearly 80 years old now. And so he qualifies as the Antichrist. So many Tico Upharsin gives you 7 sevens, and the end of those 7 sevens is when the final Ayatollah or king of the beastly kingdoms was killed and came back to life. It looks like that is a marker on the stream of time. So,
At least so far.
we've got one more event that has yet to happen, and that is, according to Daniel chapter 9, he has to confirm or strengthen a treaty with the many, which will initiate the day of the Lord. And of course, some of you heard me speak a little earlier that the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA, which John Kerry initiated, which was never signed, by the way, that it's a nuclear non-proliferation agreement, appears to be this covenant with the many. And if that be the case, Iran now is undergoing terrific pressure from all sides. This agreement with the Arab nations is putting pressure on them. We have, if you noticed in the news today, we have now increased the strain on Iran because we have cut them off from all transactions, overseas transactions. And if that continues on, guess what? They're going to be under terrific strain by this time next year, right? And maybe we'll see this next year them coming to the table and eventually being willing to sign a covenant with the many. And if you see that happening, that covenant with the many, and we'll show this as we go through Daniel, will happen on a Yom Kippur. The Rosh Hashanah, before that Yom Kippur, the last trump will blow and we will be out of here. That's my analysis of the situation, and I'm sticking to it. And that's the end of that. Yes?
Well, when I was heard, history repeats itself. I think about Nebuchadnezzar and his magicians or high priests trying to get rid of Daniel.
Yeah.
Get rid of him. And also the high priests, the Pharisees, are trying to put Christ down. And now we look at the left side versus the right side. Whether it's true or not, the left side is trying to put down the right side, which is, I think the left side is evil.
Well, as I have observed, and many have observed, right now, we don't have a political war of Republicans against Democrats. We have a war of right versus evil, in my estimation. Exactly. And Black Lives Matter is one of the offsprings of this whole business. They are out to destroy all churches. They are out to destroy the nuclear family. Right. They don't want you to have a nuclear family. And all of this has a backdrop, too. And I believe that George Soros is behind all of this. George Soros wants a global, one world ruling body. And we see that in Revelation, too. The Antichrist wants to rule over the whole world, right?
Well, and
But that's where they're trying to drive that, and you can't do that as long as the United States is strong. That's why they are squealing. And don't be surprised if we don't start seeing some outbreaks of literal war here, civil war, when Trump, and I believe he will be reelected, when that happens, I think we're going to have civil war in this country.
Well, it's not only George Soros, from what I'm hearing. The Clintons are very involved with George Soros.
Oh, no question about it.
They're in this together, and several of them.
Oh, yeah.
Probably
We could make a whale of an argument for that, along with others.
Yeah.
All of these one world government people are all in the same boat. So
that's why they cut off Newt Gingrich the other day.
Yeah, they wouldn't even let him talk. Okay, enough of this.